we want to recognize Miss Molly Mudge for her initiative in planning a full day of Saturday experience for a Rotary Youth Exchange student, Katori Yasui, I believe, on her family farm. Katari toured Mudge Farm, learned about animal husbandry, and joined Molly's grandfather in the combine harvesting the crop. We commend Molly for, her care in providing an authentic Midwest experience. Molly, would you come up and meet the board? We have a certificate for you.
Good job.
Great job now. How was he in the combine? He's all right?
Yeah.
Kind of overwhelming at times.
Nice job, Mike. Thank you.
Nice job.
I love it.
I told Jennifer I needed help with helping email. Well, she'll stop at my house the day after school. That will be good.
I should come and sit with her. I'm gonna go to Peoria tomorrow night with my granddaughter.
Well, I told her a lot of days for me are fine, at the day after school time, except Tuesday, because that's a tennis night, and so that's.
Okay, tonight for our division spotlight, we have the English department. Mrs. Michelle Honecker-Olmo, the division chair, will be speaking on behalf of the English department.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Michelle Honecker-Olmo, Division Chair, and I also have the pleasure of teaching both of our AP English classes. And since it's October, I was completely prepared to come up here and talk to you about some cool things that we're doing in our AP Lit class about Frankenstein. And then the grades came in at the end of first quarter, and we noticed some pretty special things. So I want to talk to you first about the auto enrollment that has affected our school. This is the first year that we actually put that into place, so I'll explain what that is. And then you're going to see a peek into what we do, we being Miss Behringer and I in AP English Literature, as I show you some of the really creative things that our students have done with Frankenstein, since that's what we're reading right now. So first I want to give you an update on how the auto enrollment has impacted honors and AP English classes. And this is only English. I can't speak for how it's going in math, but in English, we saw some pretty amazing things. Now at first we were nervous because the state actually passed this public act that required a student who meets or exceeds standards on a state assessment to be automatically placed in the next most rigorous level of coursework. So a student who is in regular English but does well on their ACT this year, it's ACT now, would be automatically placed into AP next year, even if they haven't had an honors course, any honors course, which is a big deal for a student. So there is a way to opt out of the auto placement, and that is signing a form that the student signs, the parent signs, and that needs to be turned in by a certain date. So some students know this is a lot of work, this would not be good for me, but some students, for whatever reason, they just don't turn it in. That could be a problem. But let me show you how this has impacted our division. So I looked at all 4 levels, from freshman English 1 honors all the way to senior AP English Lit and Comp. And this is just the impact on the enrollment. During COVID, COVID kind of killed the honors enrollment. We went from 4 sections or 5 sections of freshman honors to maybe 3. But now we're seeing that slowly come up. And especially for this year, you can see how every single class has been impacted by this. Wow. So freshmen went from 75 to 112. Usually before COVID, we had maybe 100 students, maybe 95 or 90 in freshman English. But now we have more students. And what's really significant is looking at junior year. We went from 64 students to 126 students this year. So that doubled. And it's significant because these juniors take the ACT in the spring. So we have about half of the junior class taking basically a college English class.
Wow.
So that should help our numbers, even though this is the first year of the ACT. I'm hoping for some good scores from our juniors. So looking back at last year, if we compare, this is before the auto enrollment, and keep in mind that this is first semester data from last year. But in an honors program, you would think, sure, all honors freshmen would pass. So would English 2 honors, sophomores would pass. The AP classes are similar to college level classes, plus juniors drive and they have jobs outside of LP. So that's still 98% passing is still pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you think the numbers look this year? You might think that it would be significantly different with so many students, especially that junior level. But here's our numbers this year. This is this quarter. So I realize it's not a whole semester, but consider all the students, and there aren't that many, who aren't passing. They typically pull it out by the end. So I'm guessing, I'm guessing that these will actually be higher, but there really isn't that much difference.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like 4% difference total. And any student who isn't passing these classes, and I've talked to all the teachers who teach them, if you're earning an F in this class, it's because you don't come to school, or you don't turn in the work, or both. It's not because students are failing tests or failing their papers. It's typically the truancy thing, you know, the chronic absenteeism, which is what we talk about a lot. So this really made me happy. Sure, there are some students who are struggling. We're hoping that they are able to pass by the end. It's just a matter of turning in work. But these students they're doing it. They've risen to the challenge and they're passing their courses. So again, this is just for English. I'm sure math is different, but that's what we're seeing lately. So overall, students are being successful. Okay, next up, because it is October, and Frankenstein is just a great novel to teach in October, because essentially it's science fiction, but it's also scary. And in 1818, of course, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have The Walking Dead or movies, TV. You had literature. So Mary Shelley had to make sure that she used a lot of description, which some of our students don't particularly like. But it's amazing that this woman was 18 when she wrote this book, 200 years ago. And what we think is Frankenstein isn't the monster. So all of these images here, they come from movies. I have like the original movie from the 1830s, Hotel Transylvania. Your kids probably grew up watching that or still watching it. But this image of this creature is in our culture. And the ironic thing is the creature never has a name. It's the doctor's name. So one of the first things we do as a pre-reading activity is we have students get out the whiteboards and they draw what comes to mind when we say the name Frankenstein. And they think of one word to describe it. So I gave them less than 5 minutes. And yes, the one on the left, she drew that in less than 5 minutes. She didn't take it home. This is what they came up with. And it's really interesting to see, you know, I know what their speaking skills are and their writing skills and reading skills. But when you ask them to draw something, it's amazing what they'll do in just a couple minutes. And then we look at the patterns, the scars on the face, the stitches, the square face, the jagged hair, the bolts in the neck, except for this romanticized version of the monster. But in their minds, they think that Frankenstein is the monster. But the monster's never named, which makes him tragic in a way. And when we think of Frankenstein, the story, even if you haven't seen the movie from the 1930s, we think of that famous quote, "It's alive," when the monster first comes to life. That is not true to the book. That is Hollywood. Victor is horrified when this thing opens his eye. So horrified that he runs away from it and then goes to sleep. But he totally abandons this thing. So in order for students to really start to understand the complexity of the relationship between the creator and the creation, this love-hate thing, we have them, after he creates the monster, after chapter 5, build a creature. And I was going to bring supplies for the board to work with tonight, but I thought that would be a distraction when I talked, because I know how students play around with things as they try to learn. So this is what we give them. Create your own creature from the materials in my Amazon box. I had feathers, I had pom-poms, I had a container of clay. Miss Behringer brought pipe cleaners and anything her kids had lying around the house. And it only takes not even 20 minutes, and you can see them go. And I remind them that when they become adults in a couple months, or some of them actually are, that they tend to lose this creativity, because I made one before I started using this activity, and then I saw them and what they created, and it's amazing. I told them not to lose that. So here are some examples. They have to make a creature. Sometimes they just use one color. Sometimes they get carried away with a couple. They have glue, and then they have to give it a name, and they have to tell one interesting fact. And some kids just go all out. Some of these characters have whole stories, and sometimes they get really dark. Like I had one, I didn't take a picture of it because it was kind of gruesome, but it had a hole in its stomach, and there's this whole backstory about how it owed a gang money. Like it gets kind of dark sometimes, but it really shows their personalities. So I have a rock monster. It was a person who was changed into a rock because he did something horrible. If you know the rapper Ice Spice, this is Spice Ice in the middle. There's one that's actually a cake pop, the one that looks like Frankenstein. It's pink and black. She has a red ball in the center. That's the cake, and you open it up, and it's a cake pop. But it just they're so creative when they make this. And then later in the book, not to spoil anything if you haven't read it yet and plan to read it, but Victor makes another creature and decides to destroy it. So after they read that chapter, we ask them to destroy their creature if they want, and they can't. So many of them can't because they're so attached. And even between chapter 5 and chapter 18, I think it is, when they come in the classroom, and they're all sitting around my classroom, so they get to hear us talk about the book, they always check on their creature. They'll go up to it and kind of reposition it or make sure it's like facing a certain way. But they get attached to it even though it's not alive. So then they question, well, how can Victor completely disregard this being he created if it is alive? And so we talk about, being parents, and we also talk about anything we create, whether it's a Google slide or dinner for our family, a rose garden. Everything we create is a part of us. So they tend to see this complex relationship a little better. So those are some of my students, and then this is some of Mrs. Behringer's. So you can see the pipe cleaners and feathers there. So yeah, we are on chapter 7 at this point. They take a quiz tomorrow, and it's a great Halloween book. It's just a great story. Most of them like it, and eventually there will be a paper with it as well. So it's very complex, a little dark, but it's the first novel that we studied together. So, okay. Do you have any questions on either topic I talked about? Auto enrollment or Frankenstein? Okay. Well, thank you so much.
There's no public comment this evening. Under finance, any motion for approval of the bills and payroll for LaSalle-Peru Township High School?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. Any motion of approval for the bills and payroll for the LP Area Career Center?
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. A motion of approval for the payroll report?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. A motion of approval for financial records as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. 6.3, tonight we have an auditor's report for fiscal year 2024. Mr. Bill Newkirk is here, CPA from Newkirk and Associates, to give his report.
Thank you. I'm gonna hit just a couple high points like I normally do. The first thing, stapled in the front, we have a packet that is the auditor's communication to the board. So there's certain topics that I have to communicate in writing every year to you. Page 1 just kind of explains the purpose behind it. And then page 2, we get into those topics that I've got to cover. For example, you'll see in the middle of page 2 a heading says, difficulties encountered in performing the audit. I am very pleased to report that we did not have any difficulties. The very next paragraph, we talk about corrected and uncorrected misstatements, and that's normally where I take a couple minutes. If we make any adjustments to the books of the district as part of the audit, we have to disclose that to you. So starting on page 4, we have a schedule of adjusting journal entries. Most of these, you'll see the word reclass or reclassify. That basically is when we move things just from one line item to another, that we're not necessarily changing fund balance or anything. It's just kind of cleaning up the reporting so that when we report to the state, everything's in the right function and object codes. One of the bigger entries is on the bottom of page 5. It's actually entries 7 and 8. There's some big numbers there, but it all nets to 0. Essentially what happened was an investment account got closed, and there was, the district uses pooled investments where one bank account at the bank is spread across the funds. So when that bank account got closed, like some funds had it positive and some had negative, and it all washed to 0. All we had to do was a journal entry to kind of true that all up and truly close that account out. So while there's big numbers there on entry 7 and 8, at the end of the day, it all netted out to 0 just to close that account out. So it's just how we allocated it there. And then on the last page, again, it's just more reclassifications, just getting things on the right line item within the funds for lease payments and things like that. So none of these journal entries are alarming or a major correction. I don't think any of them impacted ending fund balance, meaning that like when you were looking at your treasurer's reports, as far as total revenues and total expenditures from a really high level, we didn't really change anything. All we're doing is like within the revenue in a fund, we're changing what line item it goes on. The last part of this packet here on page 7 is our management letter. If we had any findings or issues or anything like that, we'd be required to disclose them here. I'm pleased to report this year that there were no findings, internal control issues, anything like that that came up as part of the audit. So that letter more or less just says we looked at it and didn't identify any material weaknesses, so that's a good thing. The actual bound report here, the financial statements, I'm just going to hit a couple high points. The first thing in this packet is our opinion. So starting on page 1, we issued 3 different audit opinions, and I always like to explain just kind of what you're looking at here. So starting on page 1, this is an opinion of the financial statements. This is what you're thinking of when you think of an audit, that we went through the books and records, everything looks good. The key here is that second heading that says unmodified opinion on regulatory basis. Unmodified opinion is a clean, good audit opinion. That's what the state or accreditor or anybody else is looking for. The very next paragraph, we talk about an adverse opinion on U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. So along with most districts in the state of Illinois, you guys keep books and records on a cash basis of accounting. ISB totally allows that, prescribes that, but we're required to disclose to a reader of the financial statements that it's not GAAP basis, where we don't do accruals. It's cash basis. That's all that adverse opinion is. The key is the paragraph right above that, unmodified opinion. That's what you're really looking for. On page 4, we also issue an opinion on government auditing standards. So ISB requires you to have an audit on government auditing standards, where we look at certain compliance things with both Illinois School Code and specific grants. If there were any findings on internal control or compliance, it would be disclosed in this report. But again, I'm pleased to report there was nothing like that. And then the last one, starting on page 6, we're also required to do an audit under the Single Audit Act. That is federal legislation that if you expend more than $750,000 in federal expenditures, we're required to look at those programs and look at compliance with federal regulations. We go through with a pretty fine-tooth comb, and again, no findings or issues or anything. This is an unmodified opinion that we went through and everything was good. So again, across the board, everything is what you're looking for, that there's no findings or issues. That's the main takeaway that I want to hammer home. On pages 9 and 10, we essentially have a balance sheet by fund. Again, your cash basis, so a balance sheet is more or less just cash and investments up in the assets, and then ending fund balance. Page 11, the landscape page there, this is a high-level income statement by fund. Kind of the key takeaway, I guess, would be the bottom 3 lines. If you were looking for just a quick snapshot, that third line up from the bottom is essentially net income or loss by fund. The second from the bottom is beginning fund balance as of July 1st of 23, and then the bottom line is those two added together gets you to the ending fund balance of June 30th. So really quick snapshot by fund of the performance for the year on a net income or loss, and then also kind of where you stood at the beginning and end of the year for fund balance. The next 15 pages or so are a gory detail of all the revenues and expenditures. If there's a specific question, I'm happy to answer that. It has budget versus actual, that if you were looking for something specific, there's a ton of information there, but I'm not going to bore you by going through all of that. The notes to the financial statements, I just want to hit a couple really key high points. I'm actually going to skip pretty far forward to our long-term debt note, which is all the way on page 55. It actually starts at the bottom of 54, but the schedules on 56 that continue on to 57, this is in a tabular format, kind of shows where you're at for debt. One thing, ISB ranks you with a financial profile that there's 5 metrics that they score 1 to 4. The district gets a perfect 4 in the first 4 metrics. The one metric where they only get 1 out of 4, which pulls that score down. You're still recognition under that, but the only place you're losing is how much long-term debt the district has compared to the legal debt margin. So it's just important for you guys to know and understand. I mean, you probably already do and should, but this table on the top of page 56 has all the current debt issuances and leases that are outstanding that are considered debt to the district. Again, the pages right before kind of explain when that debt was issued and the exact terms of it. And then starting at the bottom of 56 and on to 57, we have a repayment schedule on each of those that you can see what the debt to maturity schedules look like for those. So again, a lot of information there. That's key. The supplementary information in the back, we have a lot of information on the student activity funds and things like that. But then if you get to other information, so 5 or 6 pages farther back, the page numbers will change and there's other information. And I always like to point out these schedules that actually, if you were gonna look anywhere, I really like these 5 and 10 years. So starting on other information 1, we have a 10-year history of the average daily attendance in the district and operating expense, and then 1 divided by the other is operating expense per pupil. That's a metric that's in the AFR that gets submitted to ISB, but that's a good, kind of trend analysis that you can look at. On the very next page, we have 10-year history of revenues and expenditures. This is for all funds combined for the district. One key thing that I guess I would point out, and that again, I'm sure as you've looked at budget and stuff for this year, if you look at the top half on page other information 2, that's revenue, and you'll see in fiscal year 22, there was a big jump in especially federal revenue. You know, it went from less than $1 million, and then it's been over $2 million for the last 3 years. The vast majority of that is the ESSER money, the COVID response funds that you've had that now are all exhausted. So there was kind of a fiscal cliff for a lot of districts that we're anticipating between the COVID response grant money running out, as well as adjustments in CPPRT from the state. Almost all districts, I'm seeing a pretty steep decline in revenue between fiscal year 24 that we're looking at with this audit and 25 a year from now. So it's just something to be aware of that's there. But I like these schedules that show multi-year data that you can kind of look at. Continuation of that on to 3, we have a 5-year history on the levy. So while those federal dollars have gone way up, you can see that your tax rate has stayed right there between 255 and 260 for the last 5 years. So local property tax rate is really stable. It shows that most of that jump in revenue is coming from sources other than local property taxes. And then the last one shows fund balance in your operating fund. So we exclude capital projects just because there's a lot of volatility by the nature of those funds. But these are what we consider the operating funds of the district, that you can see a 5-year history of where the fund balance was. And again, you'll notice that the last 2 or 3 years, the fund balance is higher than what it's been. And again, that's a trend that we've seen with this additional revenue. It pads fund balance, and then we're expecting over the next 2 or 3 years possible, you know, at least plateauing of that. It's been a lot different with this ESSER money the last few years for every district. The last part of this report is all about the single audit. So this is all about the federal programs and things like that. If you go just a few pages from the end, it has page 50 up in the upper corner. This is a quick snapshot, and the key thing here is down that right-hand side where everything is marked no. That's asking, is there any kind of finding, basically, and the fact that that's no, 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 again, that's what you're looking for. We disclosed that the major program that we tested this year was the ESSER program. The expenditures in that were a little over 1.1 million. Your total expenditures, like I talked about, were 2 million, so we tested 55% of the federal expenditures in that one program. As part of the single audit, we're required to take a look at 40%. Going forward, ESSER is going to drop off, and we'll have 2 major programs to reach that 40% threshold. Each year we'll pick between IDEA, Title I, and possibly the food service program. Like, those are normally the 3 big ones that we'll test 2 of those 3 going forward in future years for the single audit. Are there any questions for me regarding any aspect of the audit?
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Pleasure working for you.
Yeah, you guys too.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Okay, under correspondence, 7.1, we have a thank you letter from Mrs. Cheryl DePate for the Board of Education donation, the LP Educational Foundation memory of Leona Gunyan, mother of Randy Gunyan. 7.2, we have a thank you card from the Hocking family for the beautiful arrangement in memory of Mr. Thomas Hocking, father of Mrs. Sally Caliani. 7.3, we have TIF reimbursements. The Village of North Utica, TIF 1, $26,241.04. Village of Utica, TIF 2, $9,599.88. And City of LaSalle, intergovernmental agreement, TIFs, $50,384.88. So a total TIF reimbursement of $86,225.80. Under committee reports, 8.1, Building and Grounds Committee, Mr. Ferrari.
The Building and Grounds Committee met on the afternoon of Tuesday, October 15th. We had a brief update on the future improvement projects planning. They're working to prioritize some of the future projects. We had the results of the Regional Office of Education inspection that was done in late September. I think the superintendent will speak more about that. One minor thing, there's an exit sign that needs to be put up over one of the doors. Summer projects, Howard Fellows Stadium, there's just a few little odds and ends that are being finished up for the work that was planned for this year. The Dolan Building elevator, the equipment is in, and they're awaiting some electrical equipment before they can begin installation. Sorry. God bless you, Bush.
Thank you.
The retractable goals, basketball goals in the Salette Gym are scheduled for installation at the end of this month. The two of them that currently block the new scoreboards, they'll be going in, and then the other two will be replaced at a future time. There's an exterior door that leads to one of the courtyards that's in process of being replaced. Apparently this was a door that was missed during the renovations that were done a few years ago, and so that is now being taken care of. As far as the sport complex goes, the poles and netting for the discus area have been completed. Still waiting on Coolmaster for the press box windows for the baseball complex, and the pitching cage security has been completed. As far as the Kowalski supported projects, the superintendent has more information on that. The early childhood playground and the health occupations classroom, both projects are moving forward. And there was one other item. There's a problem with the alarm bell electrical systems in a couple of the freight elevators in the building, and that is going to require a replacement costing a little over $15,000. And I believe is that an action item for tonight?
It'll be in the bills.
Okay, that's
Yep.
in the bills. All right, because that comes out of the tort fund. So that's it for the building and grounds. It was a relatively short meeting.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you, Mr. Farrar. Finance Committee, Mr. Murbaugh.
We met on Tuesday, October 15th, and reviewed the financials. And it's hard to believe, but we're 25% of the way through the fiscal year already. I mean, it seems like we just started. And I guess I'll just say, without going into much detail, it was in your packet, but the revenue is a little bit behind what was budgeted, but it's simply timing. I mean, it'll all catch up, but everything else is right in par. So there's no concerns there. It's just at that point in time, the revenue seems a little bit behind, but we'll get it all. We also discussed the tax levy for the next year. And at the time of the meeting, I don't believe we had the number.
We did not.
But some text I got later told me the number, and I
Yes.
believe it was a 9.7% increase.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
That was some good news after the fact. We also approved the transfer from working cash to capital projects in the amount of $600,000. We also approved the recommendation for credit card acquisition through Hometown National Bank, and we're recommending 4 cards at this time. The administration updated us on a meeting with Central Bank Illinois, who's basically doing what they should do, out looking to solicit our business. Dr. Robleski met with them, told them of our satisfaction with Hometown National Bank, and I think there was a follow-up meeting thereafter, but I don't know the results of all that. And then we talked about the audit that would be presented this evening, and we had a relatively short meeting also, so that's it.
Anyone have any questions? Thank you, Mr. Murbaugh. Administrative reports. Superintendent's report, Dr. Robleski.
Thank you, Mr. Sarver. Just to follow up on a couple of the points from Mr. Murbaugh and Mr. Ferrari. For the follow-up meeting that we had with Central Bank, we met with representatives from their wealth management department. That was not part of the original meeting, but we discovered that they have a wealth management department. And so we had a very nice meeting with the individuals. It was really more introductory and learned a little bit more about what their services are. They are working to establish relationships with, particularly I think school districts in the region. And so I think what they're doing is they're just making appointments and having conversations. And so we reiterated again, Mrs. Doze and I met with them. We reiterated again our relationship with Hometown, and certainly said that if something were to change in the future, we would, without question, reach out to them and call, but certainly thank them for the conversation. And then they just appreciate the opportunity to meet with us. And then following up on Mr. Ferrari with the playground. The playground is expected to be finished next week. We're going to have a punch list walkthrough on the 28th with Vernon Jones. There had been some personnel changes on their team, and so they've been really expediting the project. So if you've not had a chance to drive behind the Dolan building, if you get a chance this week, please do so.
Nice.
It's really coming together. So we'll begin working then on a ribbon cutting date before the weather gets too cold to celebrate that. And then Mr. Kometz is just continuing to work on the drawings and the bid documents for the health occupations classroom. When we last spoke, he's been working now more with his engineer on waiting for his feedback on the drawing. So we're excited to begin moving forward on that. Kind of moving more directly into my report. This is an action item, 10.1 on our new business, but I think it's appropriate to recognize that this is Principal Appreciation Week, and so we're very grateful and thankful for the leadership team that we have all sitting here this evening as well. There will be a food celebration for the entire staff in honor of our leadership team on Friday. But I wanted just to publicly thank all of our building leaders for just the excellent job that they do to support the district's initiatives and to lead our staff and guide our kids. Following up on the health, life, safety visit, as Mr. Ferrari indicated, there was initially two, but the one finding was the exit sign, which has been taken care of. The other one, we were given it was not supposed to be in the as noted as a finding during our walkthrough, but it turned up being one. We were told that on all of our windows across the district, even if you look in the windows over there, the ones behind us, we have pull chains on them. And so we were told that we had to either change the pull chain so that way it's detached, which we can't do because there's little balls on there that guide, where the stops are, or to attach one of those little hooks that the chain would get latched into onto the frame of the window. Well, there's over 2,000 of those. Not that we wouldn't do it, but I shared with the Buildings and Grounds Committee. This is the first time I've done this, but I actually pushed back on that, and I said, this was done during our renovation, 2017 to 2019. We have had how many ROE visits since then? This is the first time that this has ever come up, and so we're asking for either some kind of relief or a waiver, on this because this has never been an issue before, and they approved our request. So I think that's lesson learned there too. Say it nicely. But so we're very grateful. We're very grateful to the ROE for not requiring us to. Plus, number one, we don't feel it's a safety issue. This really, I think, is maybe more of an early elementary issue for the little kids than it would be with our.
And I can tell you that the thing that's telling you to put on it, I put on them in homes all the time.
So.
They don't stay well, they get caught, they cause this blind tube malfunction.
Yeah.
So you're better off without them.
That's good. That is good feedback there as well, Mrs. Arrow.
You had to
So
put
I
'em on at
appreciate
the
that.
shelter. You had to put them on at the shelter.
Yeah. This week has been just a very, very productive week. I'm sure Mrs. Cushing is going to speak a little bit more on that as well. But I'll just touch base on more of our PLC work that we have been doing with our consultants. We had Mr. Balderman here on the 21st. Met with representatives from our English, math, and science divisions. The focus was beginning to look at how are we using our common assessment data to drive intervention planning, reteaching. We're getting some very good feedback from Jack on that. We have a follow-up meeting. Actually, I'll let Mrs. Cushing talk more about that in her report as far as what we're going to be doing with the department chairs. But it was a very good next visit with Mr. Balderman. Today was a school improvement day. It was originally planned for a articulation day with our elementary schools, but two of our largest districts, center districts, LaSalle and Peru, had some scheduling conflicts, and so that's 2/3 of our student enrollment. As we look at the classes, and so we all agree. The superintendents and I agreed we're going to do our own in-house program, and I'm kind of glad that worked out that way. What we did today with the staff is we broke them into interdisciplinary teams, and we shared with them the results, the 5 essentials survey, and then through Solution Tree with our consulting firm, we did an additional survey that's kind of tied in with our school improvement efforts. And so the overarching theme was focusing on giving staff more voice in terms of just feedback operations. And so we got some really good feedback, asked them to prioritize or identify 3 strengths and then 2 areas that we kind of described as shining more light on that we want to then consider as future improvement areas. And then we spent time getting staff feedback on the pre-huddle huddle structure that we have in place. And so we have a lot of information to go through as a leadership team, but we're looking forward to reviewing that and to be able to give the staff an opportunity to give input. And then lastly, Friday, October 30th, the next Wednesday from 6 to 7:30. Is going to be, we're calling it Replanting the Ag Program, LP's Ag Program. And so this is our kind of our kickoff meeting with our students and our families and the local business community to really kind of begin to build the coalition for our ag renewal. That's all I have.
Any questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. Blusky.
Thank you.
Principal's report, Mrs. Cushing.
As Dr. Obleski shared, we've been very busy. I would say actually for a little longer than a week. I'd say a good week and a half that we've had a lot of activities going on in the building. We had parent-teacher conferences last week. I don't have all of the data collected. I'm still waiting on a few of our faculty members to finish reporting, but I am confident that they will. What we have turned in so far, our numbers look pretty similar to what they have in the past, with their Thursday evenings being much higher in attendance than our Fridays. But overall numbers I don't have quite ready for you yet, but I can share those with you next time around. Another great activity that we had this week on the 21st was our Link Crew leaders met with our entire freshmen over in the East Gym. They had lunch with them for 5A. They did some little mini lesson, I guess I'll call it, on prioritizing during 5B, and then they worked in teams to create goals with their students and freshmen on aligning kind of in the theme of our SMART goals as well, and talk to them about how to create a social goal. A lot of them came up with joining clubs or attending events. At least that was the groups when I was visiting with them. That was a lot of their thoughts, and then they had to come up with a academic goal as well. So they talked a lot about improving grades and those types of things. So it was a great activity for all of our students. They got to have fun, eat a good lunch, and then also work on our SMART goals. We're also bringing back tutoring as well, so if you hear about that in the community, we are bringing back tutoring in all of our usual areas of math, English, social science, science, business, and world languages. So we have a lot of hours to offer. Those are both before school and after school, depending on what's available within each of those divisions. And also, as Dr. Obleski shared, we did do some work with PLC. So he started off with what we did at the beginning of the week, and I'll finish with what we're going to do at the end of the week. On Friday, we're going to work with our PLC leadership team, which again consists of really all of our superintendent's council leaders, and then also our division chairs. And we'll be spending time looking at all of our first quarter data, which I'm going to share a little slice of that with you here shortly. And then we're also going to talk about just some different instructional strategies and how we're going to prioritize those and sort of unify all of us together on some of those concepts, such as maybe like test retakes and some of those kinds of things to foreshadow a little bit. There's some other things in my report there about tests that we're doing and finishing up drills, lots of details on those. So if you want some more information on that, certainly take a peek at that. As far as data, there's an extra report in there that I had included on the STAR 360 data. I've been sharing this with you guys each year that we've conducted this. The first sheet there just shows very much what our students are up to this year. I would say that the areas shaded in green are what we really want to focus in on and increasing those numbers. Overall, we're kind of hovering in the 20s and 30s%, which is pretty typical for us. And I would say that kind of this year's data shows that our as we go through the years, our students are doing better on the tests. The second page there just gives a 4-year trend of where we have been, comparing it by classes. I think the most helpful piece of data, though, to show and talk to us a little bit about growth for our students is the last one, which talks about the cohort data. And in that one, we can actually see that our students are starting to have some growth in the classes. So I've got it divided there for you by a class of 27, 26, etc. And you can start to see that we're really making gains both in reading and in math. So it is nice to see. It's promising. We'll hope that it translates in the classroom, and we'll hope that it translates onto our ACT scores as well. Are there any questions for me this evening?
Thank you,
Okay.
Mrs. Cushing.
Thank you.
Athletic Director's report, Mr. Hanson. Looking pretty dapper tonight.
I dressed up. It's about as good as it gets, sorry. But thanks for noticing. Appreciate it. Like everybody else, it's been crazy time here. So week 9 in football. So there's been a lot going on since the report I submitted to you. So I'll just kind of touch base on what's happened since I turned in my report last Friday and Saturday. Our tennis team was in Ottawa and captured the sectional championship as a team, and all 6 individuals qualified for the state tournament, which opens tomorrow at 8 a.m. up in the northwest suburbs. So we'll have 6 girls competing at the highest level tomorrow morning. So kudos to Coach Gunther and the rest of the squad. Soccer team last night unfortunately ended their season at Ottawa, 1-0 loss to Galesburg. Tough loss. Or talking to Coach, we dominated the ball but just couldn't put it in the net. That happens sometimes. So tomorrow night here, volleyball will be competing for the conference championship. We play Canelan. That's our only conference loss to date. So they come in at 7-2. We're 8-1. So hopefully we get a lot of fans here and pack the place and send the Knights back crying. But they are also gearing up for regionals. They start their regional tournament a week from last night, so next Tuesday in Dixon. They're the number 1 seed, which feeds into the Ottawa sectional in a couple weeks. So on October 15th, we did send 12 leaders to the Interstate 8 Leadership Conference in Morris Country Club, where there's a really dynamic presenter, Ted Weiss, that the kids just love. He's a motivational speaker, gets them engaged. They get the opportunity to engage with other leaders in the conference, and it just creates a good camaraderie amongst the schools. And I think it's like 5th year maybe. I know we did it last year, and we've signed him again for next year. So he's really a positive experience for the kids. And then last for me is our
everybody else has been busy, but our band's been really busy in their competition season this fall, competing on the weekends. So they spend a lot of time. They've been to Plainfield, they've been to Morton, they competed in Utica. Those students work really, really hard, and I think sometimes it goes unnoticed the amount of hours that they put into prepare. Not only did we have 5 football games this fall that they prepared for, but then working on the weekends too. So kudos to them. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Hans. Director of the Area Career Center, Dr. Lang.
Thankfully, I'm not giving the auditor's report tonight. So, aside from the obvious and learning new skills, one of my favorite parts about the Career Center is the opportunity for students to go out and see the different careers that are available to them in the region, especially. So, a lot of that's been happening in October. But first, I want to talk about one of the cool things we did in September. So, the ACC in Sarafti hosted the regional Principal/Counselors Day. And we were able to come together and talk about the good things that are going on in CTE, some of the changes that are going to be happening, and then just ways that we can get better. So heard a lot of feedback. It was a really great discussion with the counselors and the principals. And Lori Turzin and the culinary students made a light breakfast, and they've been pretty busy. They like to make a lot of food for people around here, and they prepared a breakfast for the leadership team and then also the principals for the partner schools just this week. On October 3rd, students and teachers from building trades, machining, welding, electricity, CAD participated in Streeter's Manufacturing Day. So they went over to Streeter. They also went to the incubator at the end to kind of talk to the manufacturers about jobs and that kind of thing. And I think IVCC usually goes there as well. But they went to hear from Alloy Specialties, Illinois Valley Machine, Vactor, and US Truck Body. So they got to visit those locations as well. The fire science and automotive programs participated in like a fire safety training day. So the students got to learn how to use the fire extinguishers properly, and they learned about some not so great practices trying to put fires out, which can cause obviously fires to spread. So it's great that they know how to do that. So if they do start a fire, we don't have to call the fire trucks, hopefully. On Tuesday, October 15th, the students participated in another regional manufacturing day, and then they also went to IVCC, so it was the Manufacturing Expo. The LP students, they went to GAF and Karis. So they got to tour the plant, do those kinds of things there, learn about what's happening right here, and then they went over to IVCC and they met with 5 program coordinators and how those programs are related. So that was pretty cool there. 12 manufacturers participated in the kind of all-day thing over there. Let's see, and those programs that participated in that were CAD, machining, electricity, welding, and maintenance. 200 students participated in that event. Also, really great thing, Matt Lee is really good at getting quality equipment over there in the machining program. And this month they took delivery of 2 new CNC machines. They were donated from Track Machines. They're state-of-the-art. There's a milling machine and then also another lathe. So currently there's 2 main types of programming language when it comes to CNC, and now we have both. So prior to that, we just had G-code type, where the students would go in and program whatever they're trying to build. And now we have a conversational CNC setup so that they can actually make one-off parts. And the way they do that is it's kind of a step-by-step in the machine. So instead of writing the code, they might have a part already, or maybe one that's been 3D printed from the CAD program, and then they can put that in there and then use the CMM in the machine to design it right there so they don't have to write the code. So obviously having been over at IVCC in that program and then on a manufacturing committee for the state, I kind of know what's going on in the state with manufacturing programs and whatnot. And we have some of the best state-of-the-art equipment in that program. So, happy to report that. That's it.
Any questions?
Thank
you, Dr. Lang. Director of Communications, Mr. Baker.
Good evening, everyone. I'm supposed to have big things. Like everyone else, it's always busy now. But since we last spoke, we helped live stream the fall choral concert, which I think was a great success for the choir program. Really nice performance there. And then the big piece will be getting ready for our annual Veterans Day assembly. Really trying to take advantage of the technology we have and things we've been adding over the years to be able to live stream and do some new things with Message Center to really create a special event that day. So we'll be gearing up for that. That's actually about it. Otherwise, LP Foundation has kind of got through the first few big events of the year, and now it'll be a little bit of quiet time until start gearing up for the kind of some of the spring events. Although grants were just awarded. I missed that meeting, so I don't know, Dr. Robleski, if there's anything
No,
about
they were.
foundation
They,
grants you'd like
they
to share.
approved nearly $12,000 in teacher requests.
Yeah, good.
So it was a great evening.
Any questions for anybody? All right, have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Under new business, 10.1, the motion of approval to adopt Governor Pritzker's proclamation declaring October 20th through 26th, 2024, Principal Appreciation Week, and October 25th, 2024, Principal's Day.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. 10.2, new motion of approval of resolution 2025-3, to abate $600,000 in the working cash, Fund 70, to the capital projects, Fund 60.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. 10.3, any motion of approval to establish a district credit card account with Hometown National Bank.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. 10.4, I need emotional approval to create the following activity accounts: A, goals activity account, and B, huddle activity account.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. 10.5, I need emotional approval for the following resignations: A, Miss Monica Kreiser, Administrative Assistant to the Athletic Director, effective September 20th, 2024. B, Mr. Chad Arnett, Volunteer Assistant Basketball Coach, effective September 30th, 2024. And C, Mr. Mark Lorden, Assistant Wrestling Coach, effective October 23rd, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. 10.6, a motion of approval of the following appointments: A, Mr. Evan Swingle, Volunteer Assistant Boys Basketball Coach, effective for the 2024-2025 school year. B, Mrs. Abigail Gore, Renaissance Co-Advisor, effective for the 2024-2025 school year, which is a new position. And C, Mr. Mark Lorden, Volunteer Assistant Wrestling Coach, effective for the 2024-2025 school year.
So, second.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. A motion of approval of the following maternity, paternity leave request: A, Mrs. Courtney Curley, beginning on or about Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025, and returning for the 2025-2026 school year. She will use her accumulated sick days and unpaid leave. And B, Mr. Aaron Gunther, for 1 week beginning on or about Wednesday, April 4th, 2025. He will use his accumulated sick days to cover the leave.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. 10.8, the emotional approval of the LP Crunching Calves Youth Wrestling Program request to host the annual Crunching Calves Classic Tournament at LP High School on Sunday, January 26th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Murbaugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes. I need a motion to go into executive closed session for the purpose of A, discussion of the minutes of the meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meeting Act, whether for the purpose of approval by the body of the minutes or the semi-annual review of the minutes. B, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employee. C, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or the representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. D, purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired, and E, imminent pending litigation with open session and possible action items to follow.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Roebuck?
Yes.
Mrs. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mrs. Taliani?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Dr. Lynch?
Yes.
Mr. Pacetto?
Yes.
Mr. Sarver?
Yes.